The story continues. Next reading is from Exodus chapter 16, verses 2 through 31. Listen for the living word of the Lord. The whole congregation of the Israelites complained against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness. The Israelites said to them, "If only we had died by the hand of the Lord in the land of Egypt, when we sat by the flesh pots and ate our fill of bread. For you have brought us out into this wilderness to kill this whole assembly with hunger." Then the Lord said to Moses, "I'm going to rain bread from heaven for you, and each day the people shall go out and gather enough for that day. In that way I will test them whether or not they will follow my instruction. On the sixth day, when they prepare what they bring in, it will be twice as much as they gather on other days." So Moses and Aaron said to all the Israelites, "In the evening you shall know that it was the Lord who brought you out of the land of Egypt. And then in the morning you shall see the glory of the Lord, because he has heard your complaining against the Lord. For what are we that you complain against us?" And Moses said, "When the Lord gives you meat to eat in the evening and your fill of bread in the morning, because the Lord has heard the complaining that you utter against him, what are we? Your complaining is not against us, but against the Lord." Then Moses said to Aaron, "Say to the whole congregation of the Israelites, draw near to the Lord, for he has heard your complaining." And as Aaron spoke to the whole congregation of the Israelites, they looked toward the wilderness, and the glory of the Lord appeared in the cloud. The Lord spoke to Moses and said, "I have heard the complaining of the Israelites. You shall say to them, at twilight you shall eat meat, and in the morning you shall have your fill of bread, and then you shall know that I am the Lord your God." In the evening quails came up and covered the camp, and in the morning there was a layer of dew around the camp. And when the layer of dew lifted, there on the surface of the wilderness was a fine, flaky substance, as fine as frost on the ground. When the Israelites saw it, they said to one another, "What is it?" For they did not know what it was. Moses said to them, "It is the bread that the Lord has given you to eat. This is what the Lord has commanded. Gather as much of it as each of you needs, an omer per person, according to the number of persons, all providing for those in their own tents." The Israelites did so, some gathering more, some less. But when they measured it with an omer, those who gathered much had nothing over, and those who gathered little had no shortage. They gathered as much as each of them needed. And Moses said to them, "Let no one leave any of it over until morning." But they did not listen to Moses. Some left part of it until morning, and it became wormy and rotten. And Moses was angry with them. Morning by morning they gathered it as much as each needed, but when the sun grew hot, it melted. On the sixth day they gathered twice as much food, 2 omers apiece. When all the leaders of the congregation came and told Moses, he said to them, "This is what the Lord has commanded. Tomorrow is a day of solemn rest, a holy Sabbath to the Lord. Bake what you want to bake, and boil what you want to boil, and all that is left over put aside to be kept until morning." So they put it aside until morning, just as Moses commanded them, and it did not rot, and there were no maggots in it. Moses said, "Eat it today, for today is a Sabbath to the Lord. Today you will not find it in the field. 6 days you shall gather it, but on the 7th day, which is a Sabbath, there will be none." On the 7th day, some of the people went out together, and they found none. The Lord said to Moses, "How long will you refuse to keep my commandments and instructions? See, the Lord has given you the Sabbath. Therefore, on the 6th day, he gives you food for 2 days. Each of you stay where you are. Do not leave your place on the 7th day." So the people rested on the 7th day. The Israelites called it manna. It was like white coriander seed, and the taste of it was like wafers made with honey. Holy wisdom, holy words. Thanks be to God. So who are we? Not me, not you, but we as the people of God. And where do we find what sustains life? We start this conversation about life by looking at death. It is said that hospice workers become spiritual directors just by observing the process of transformation to our real selves in the dying process. Kathleen Dowling Singh, a longtime hospice worker and spiritual teacher, said the life and death of a human being is exquisitely calibrated to automatically produce union with the Spirit at the end. Hospice workers who walk with us through the natural processes of dying, of letting go, will tell you that the last days of a life are holy, are spiritual, are set apart in a way that is difficult to describe. At the end of our earthly journey, we receive the gift of letting go because we can do nothing else. But it's possible right now to begin to see the joy in letting go of the things that keep us in pain, things that keep us away from each other, things that keep us locked in fear and denial and self-preservation. The life of faith, the life as the people of God, the life as Jesus followers begins and matures with the letting go of all that prevents our trust in God, our union with the holy, all through our lives. This whole congregation of the Israelites had been freed from Egyptian slavery, brought out of Egypt, and promised a land and an identity as God's people. But they were very much at the beginning of their journey. Through God's mighty works, God had created their new identity. But in this episode that we read, their perceptions do not correspond to their new reality. They have not yet become who they are. The list of everything they owned, everything they thought defined who they were, everything they thought they preferred, was hindering their ability to live this new life given to them. They complained passionately about everything to Moses and Aaron. They would rather have been killed in Egypt, like the Egyptians were, because at least they would have died with the routines and the food that they knew, rather than this new and different and threat of dying of starvation in the wilderness. What they thought they knew, like deeply and securely knew, kept them actually from recognizing who God had created them to be. What they thought they preferred was keeping them from transformation as God worked to transform the world back to God's original intention. As a response to this complaining, this ingratitude, this short-sightedness, this version of, we've never done it this way before, God provided ordinary sustenance every day for every person. In Fretheim's exploration of Exodus, he reminds us of a detailed description of the manna, which actually corresponds closely to a natural phenomenon in the Sinai Peninsula. A type of plant lice punctures the fruit of the tamarisk tree and excretes a substance from this juice, a yellowish-white flake or ball. And during the warmth of the day, it disintegrates, but it congeals when it's cold. It has a sweet taste, it's rich in carbohydrates and sugar, and it is still gathered by the natives who bake it into a kind of bread and call it manna. The food also decays quickly and attracts ants. And regarding the quails, he says migratory birds flying in from Africa or blown in from the Mediterranean Sea are often exhausted enough to be caught by hand. Such gifts of God's good creation are placed at Israel's disposal. But, Fretheim says, what they do with the gift is not an insignificant matter. God insists on the ordinary processes of daily provision as a world-changing miracle. In the letting go of control and trusting God for daily needs, faith is freed from fear, and the people begin to understand that the divine will is in people's best interest, and that God's providential care falls fully inside the ordinary of our lives. God simply bestows blessings on us again and again and again and again and again. But God's people had to learn to trust the process. Daily, they gathered the manna they needed. If they got too much, they found it was just enough. Too little, grew to just enough. Collect for tomorrow, it spoiled. just enough for each person worked. Except on day 6. On day 6, they rested. They could gather enough for 2 days. God provided. And when they followed God's command, the people were recreated into a rhythm that gave each what they needed, a rhythm that ordered life on God's will and way. Not the oppression and greed of the empire, which was embodied by the Pharaoh, not the fear that makes us cling to more than our share. Not surprisingly, the people got it wrong before they got it right. I recently sat in a meeting of folks in the presbytery in which the future of the presbytery came up, along with the future of the churches in the presbytery. And one young man challenged the group by reminding us that we talk things to death. And at his church, they had talked and talked and talked and talked and made plans, lots of plans, but no one actually did anything. They clung tightly to their habitual ways of being in the world with the activities that were comfortable, even though they were starving. The church closed. They looked for a miracle. They prayed for a miracle, but I wonder if they were looking for an extraordinary miracle that would come from the outside, from above, from the mountaintop or the parted sea. And as their heads were in the clouds or seeking the amazing, did they miss the everyday blessings and provisions and opportunities that God offered? Did they miss the manna? We'd like our salvation to come from the big, the best, the top, the great, or the popular, because those are the stories we remember. The rain released by Elijah's sacrifice and the lightning that takes out 400 prophets of Baal. That sticks in our head. We remember the parted sea. We remember the 10 plagues, the 10 commandments, the angels that sing at the birth of a baby, the healing of a blind man, the feeding of the 5,000, the calming of the sea, the resurrection, tongues of flame in an upper room at Pentecost. We long for the miracle. We pray for the miracle. We seek the miracle. We complain to God that God owes us the miracle, and the best possible miracle, God, would be that we could keep all the things that we love to do and our same kind of everything, and that people would just swarm in our doors and we could be like we were in the 1960s and live happily ever after. But when we cling tightly to whatever is us and not God, we miss the miracle of daily bread. The bread that nourishes, the bread that must be gathered every day by each person. The bread that will not keep through the next day except on the day of rest. The plain old everyday bread, nothing special bread of life. We tend to forget the lunch and the nap that was part of Elijah's journey. And we don't pay much attention to fish for breakfast on the lake shore. We overlook the meals that Jesus ate with his disciples, and there were a lot of them. We look right past the walks, the prayers, the study, the conversations, and the worship that made up Jesus' daily life. You would think our clinging would bring us closer to what we want, but it multiplies the distance, actually. The congregation that crossed the sea found themselves in a new situation, one in which life is different from what it has been for generations, and they do not know what to do. And they are afraid, and they are angry, and they are separated, and they've forgotten that the true distance from us to God is nothing. God is here, and God provides. So I'm not sure what our status is on dying today. You and I both know it could be any minute, or it could be tomorrow, or it could be 20 years from now. But is it time for us to let go so that we might truly live the rest of our days? To let go of habits formed over a lifetime of expectations that cannot be met in a new land. To let go of being so sure that what was is all that can be. To let go of making assumptions about what is instead of actually experiencing what is. God offers a new start that fascinatingly is just another step on the journey, but it is a step in a new direction. God's provision is indeed the gift of our existence. It is the breath of our life. It is the nurture of our faith, the manna of our days. Amen.